Neville month continues. Not really Neville month, but this is a mini course on the best techniques that Neville talks about. And I actually made a playlist. So now on the bottom of each of these videos, in this mini course, you'll be able to, watch all the videos in order if you have not watched the earlier ones. If this is the first video of mine you've ever watched, I guess this is a good place to start. But I should say, for those of you who are unfamiliar with my stuff, that I generally look at Neville and benefited personally the most from Neville's teachings, from more of like I would say like big picture application of a lot of his ideas in my life. And, I've written about this and I've spoken about it personally, like how I utilize his ideas. I made a video last summer talking about the techniques I rely on when it comes to manifesting ideas. And, Neville's overarching technique of assuming that things are the way you want them to be right now is something that deeply affected me. I'll put a link above to that video because it will be helpful for a lot of you, I think. But, for those of you who don't know, I don't just make freaking car videos about these subjects. I've written multiple books about applying Neville's teachings in your life. And the approach I take is one of just many approaches that you could take. But for me, I always link that sense of deep relaxation, that sense of fulfillment right now. I always link that with Neville's teachings. That is what for me really reverberates. That is my angle on a lot of the stuff that Neville talks about. And, I've written about it in Relax More, Try Less. If you've never read any of my books, Relax More, Try Less is probably the best place to start if you are interested in this concept in relation to Neville. And I also wrote Mindful Manifestation and Manifestation Through Relaxation, all about this overarching theme of how relaxation and being at peace in this moment not only makes you feel better right now, which is a reason in and of itself to do it, but actually in very strange ways that Neville explains very interestingly, makes your life externally improve in significant ways, right? So that's more big picture, like what Neville has done for me. And I think what Neville does for a lot of people is his big picture ideas, assuming something and having it come to pass is very powerful. But his specific techniques are obviously hugely helpful for so many people. And they're an incredibly sexy subject right now on YouTube and on Instagram and on Reddit and all this stuff. And I just feel like, generally speaking, the techniques that Neville shares are overcomplicated or muddled a lot of the time when we hear people talking about them on places like YouTube. And Neville himself muddles the message of how simple and straightforward his techniques are. Not necessarily easy, but how simple and straightforward they are. He kind of muddles it some in his 1960s lectures because they're so also involve the promise material so much, which is a very subjective experience of Neville's and not something that's relevant to most people, in my opinion, whatsoever. What is relevant and what is helpful is Neville's general outlook on how to manifest stuff, and his specific instructions, his specific techniques for how to do that are super helpful. Are they the only way to manifest things externally? A lot of people into Neville would say, yes, they are. Well, guess what? They're full of shit. Of course they're not. There's so many different techniques you can use. But the techniques that Neville laid out for years and explained, in my opinion, most succinctly in 5 lessons are really helpful, specific manifesting techniques that you can utilize. And we've gone over them the last several videos. So the last video, we read, the instructions from lesson 2, the end of lesson 2. Now we're on to lesson 3 from 5 lessons. One of my favorite Neville lectures of all time. This is the famous lecture where he shares the Abdullah story. Obviously, he shares the Abdullah story in many of his lectures, but this is probably the most famous example of him sharing the Abdullah story, and of him going to Barbados. The lecture is called Thinking Fourth Dimensionally. And near the very end of the lecture, he once again, like in the previous 2 lectures and the 2 lectures that come after this, shares very specific instructions on how to utilize his manifesting techniques. And if you've been watching all these random Neville videos or listening to people on Reddit expounding on this stuff, you might be shocked with how straightforward Neville is explaining his technique. That's why I'm making this set of videos. So, Neville says at the end of this lecture, the 3rd lecture in 5 lessons, "Now, before we go into the silence period, I shall briefly explain the technique again. We have 2 techniques in applying this law. Everyone here must now know exactly what he wants. You must know that if you do not get it tonight, you will still be as desirous tomorrow concerning this objective. When you know exactly what you want, construct in your mind's eye a single, simple event which implies fulfillment of your desire. An event where self predominates. Instead of sitting back and looking at yourself as though you were on the screen, you be the actor in the drama. Restrict the event to one single action. If you are going to shake a hand, because that implies fulfillment of your desire, then do that and that only. Do not shake hands and then wander off in your imagination to a dinner party or to some other place. Restrict your action to simply shaking hands and do it over and over again until that handshake takes on the solidity and the distinctiveness of reality. If you feel you cannot remain faithful to an action, I want you now to define your objective and then condense the idea, which is your desire, into a single phrase, a phrase which implies fulfillment of your desire. Some phrase such as, "Isn't it wonderful?" Or if I felt thankful because I thought someone was instrumental in bringing my desire to pass, I could say, "Thank you," and repeat it with feeling over and over again like a lullaby until my mind was dominated by the single sensation of thankfulness. We will now sit quietly in these chairs with the idea which implies fulfillment of our desire, condensed to a single phrase or to a single act. We will relax and immobilize our physical bodies. Then let us experience in imagination the sensation which our condensed phrase or action affirms. If you have questions about what I just read, refer to the previous videos in this mini course. This is straightforward fucking stuff, folks. This might not be your preferred manifesting law of assumption LOA technique, because everybody's all about sexy techniques. But if you want to follow Neville's teachings and apply his techniques simply, this is how to do it. This is how to do it. He just lays it out. He just lays it out here so clearly. That's what this mini course is about. He says the same thing basically over and over again. And you're going to see in the 4th and 5th lectures, he just does the same thing again. I hope this was helpful. If you want coaching about this stuff or manifesting in general or feeling better in general, or if you have any questions for me that are genuine, you're interested in this stuff but don't understand something, you have a question, feel free to email me at info at radicalcounselor.com, or you can simply go on my website for more information or to contact me, which is radicalcounselor.com. Until next time, let us go into the silence.